Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see then what is making the headlines with the columnist Carole Malone and the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp. Welcome to both of you, right through till midnight. We'll see them. So, front pages. Let's start with the Metro. With many travellers facing uncertainty over the government's traffic light system, the Metro describes the situation as hokey-cokey travel chaos. The Eye reports that special bus services will be laid on and social media influencers will be encouraged to use their platforms to persuade 16 and 17-year-olds to get the COVID vaccine, to which they are now entitled. The Daily Mail accuses the Climate Change Minister Alok Sharma of hypocrisy after it emerged he flew to 30 countries on business and never quarantined. According to the Daily Telegraph, some universities are setting their own entrance exams because A-level grades affected by the pandemic aren't giving them a clear enough picture of who they should admit. Same lead story on the front of The Guardian, which suggests that extra cash will be made available for medical schools as grades surge. The Prime Minister is facing criticism for laughing about Margaret Thatcher's closure of coal mines and saying it gave the UK a head start to end the use of fossil fuels. That's the lead for the Mirror. The FT has details of plans for what the Bank of England calls a modest tightening of monetary policy in order to keep inflation under control. More papers due in, obviously. Those are what we have so far. Carole and Liam are here. And let's start with the Metro, which goes on sort of travel limbo, hokey-cokey travel chaos, which Liam, presumably, Grant Shapps was hoping was a sort of headline that wasn't going to happen anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, he's hoping in his announcement today as well to provide a bit more stability. They've changed the rules somewhat now that the update for when countries are being put on certain coloured lists is going to be every 3 weeks rather than every one. And he's hoping that that means that people will have a bit more confidence in making their holiday choices. But this is the headline that he didn't want. And this is thousands of UK holidaymakers who are in Mexico. Basically, as they were flying to Mexico, the country got put on the red list. So they then had basically a massive scramble to try and get back to avoid this extremely costly and difficult quarantine. And we've seen some of the conditions in these quarantine hotels, and they're not really somewhere you want to be, and paying thousands and thousands of pounds for it. So as you can imagine, I think the Metro's got quotes from a couple on their rearranged honeymoon. Absolutely devastating for them to find out, basically, upon landing, that they are then they've got 2 days to get home before to avoid this and lose out on their holiday. So it's more chaos. I mean, I have to say that the travel programme from the government this summer has been totally chaotic. I admire anyone who is daring to venture on a foreign holiday. I'll be keeping well in there. I think I'm going to Anglesey. That's my plan.
Good for you. I have to admit, I've just cancelled my holiday. It's just all too much like hard work. The Metro talks about that increased cost of the red zone and hotel quarantine. A family of 4 with 2 teens is to leap 78% from 3,700 to 6,575. Grant Shapps saying that it's not been meeting the costs. They were millions short, which is why the prices have gone up. But many travel agents, tour operators, airlines, etc., saying, you know, it's been so ruined, it's too late, and people are too nervous to travel. And in a sense, it's a sector that has just been clobbered and continues to be clobbered. This is such an important season, isn't it, Carole, for the travel industry?
You know, I got an email today from a man who runs a travel-dependent business, and it was one of the saddest things that I've ever read. And he just said today, you know, he's written a letter, he's written an email to Grant Shapps, and he says, you know, it's people like him who bear the fallout of these ridiculous, you know, choppy, changey government decisions. He says, you know, his savings has gone, he's about to lose his home, he's about to lose his business, and he's saying all it needs to be done is that people need to be double-jabbed and tested before they come back into the country. And he's right, you know, and this is one of the saddest emails that I've ever read, because it is people like him who are dealing with the fallout. And every time Boris and people like Grant Shapps do one of these flip-flop turnarounds, they wreck people's lives. I mean, Liam mentioned that honeymoon couple. You know, they were going for 2 weeks. God knows how long they saved up, and many thousands of pounds. And they're going to land. They're going to spend the day they land packing to come back the next day, and it's going to cost them a fortune, because now single seats back from Mexico, you know, this is rip-off. They're costing £7,000. It's ludicrous. And if they don't pay that £7,000 to get back, you just mentioned the cost of those hotels. You know, 2,800 for one person, and 1,500 quid for a teenager to stay in these hotels, which are not great places. And, you know, Shaps was asked today, because he was talking about how this new 3-week turnaround thing he's going to have, where they re-examine the conditions every 3 weeks. He says this is going to mean that people aren't going to be looking over their shoulders. Yes, they are, because he couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't be every 3 weeks. He said if conditions change, it'll be every 2 weeks or every 1 week. So people don't know what the hell they're supposed to be doing now. It's a mess.
I mean, it's not all bad news. Travel firms saying they've seen a huge surge in demand. For example, train operator Eurostar said bookings on its London to Paris route doubled after the confirmation that France would get off its special Amber Plus listing. Online travel agency Skyscanner recorded a 45% increase. Airline Emirates said it had received a huge surge in queries. And so it goes on. Just going to...
But Anna,
yeah.
you mentioned those companies. Those companies have doubled the price of their tickets today in anticipation of what's going to happen on Sunday. And people are getting ripped off all the time. It's great for Eurostar. They're going to make a fortune because of these flip-flops. But, you know, this is not good for people who've saved up all year for a holiday.
Yeah, the changes to the travel rules come into effect at 4 a.m. on Sunday, which is effectively overnight on Saturday. I never understand, given most holiday companies run Saturday to Sunday, why they don't just make it overnight on Sunday, so you get at least Sunday's travel home. Anyway, I'm just going to draw your attention to a story on the bottom of the front page of the Telegraph, which is that MPs are suggesting that travel tests are a rip-off. As it emerged, holidaymakers are paying the equivalent of £100,000 for each test that is actually sequenced. These are the PCR tests, and the great, you know, debate about them is that they allow genetic sequencing to find variants. But the story, of course, is that only 5% or 1 in 20 actually get sequenced. So, Liam, just as we leave the travel section, suggestion you should have a lateral flow test, and if that's positive, then you get PCR tested, and then that can be sequenced. Is that? I mean, the pressure's going to carry on this, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because we know that the lateral flow tests are not as accurate. For example, me and my partner recently had COVID, both of us, and it several lateral flow tests through the week before we tested positive, and then obviously you go for the PCR. The questions around it are how accurate it is and whether you are sort of infectious at that time, whereas the PCR is obviously better at picking it up. But, you know, obviously these are huge costs, and for people who are already forking out a lot to go on holiday to pay. And it's, again, just one more thing that is going to obviously put people off wanting to travel.
Yeah, hope you're both okay. Are you all right?
Yes. Mainly.
Sorry, don't talk to me. Nothing wrong with me.
No.
Yes.
Fine, Carol's fine.
You're fine. OK, well, good to hear. And you, Carole, obviously. Good to hear too. Let's go to the eye, shall we? 16 and 17-year-olds, confirmation yesterday that they will have access to the jab. It's how to get to them now and how to get the message across. She's coughing now. She's still fine. It's, you know, and the idea is it's going to be on buses, you know, messages in nightclubs even and so on. But it's an important age range, I suppose, Carole, isn't it, to get jabbed?
Well, it's a very important age range, considering that the people in hospital now are young people. There's 1,000 young adults critically ill in hospital as we speak. And you know, but there's a part of me gets, you know, a bit across the idea that young people are having to be bribed with cinema tickets and kebabs and pizzas, and they're going to be buses going round, you know, making it easy for them to get a jab. Why aren't they getting a jab? You know, it's a social responsibility. You know, that's got to come before their personal choice now. And I just, it makes me a little bit cross that young people aren't taking up the vaccine in the way they should, in light of the fact that the majority of people in hospital are young, and 70% of those who are ill in hospital haven't had the jab. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Get the jab, you know, never mind what your morals or your principles are. Get a jab inside, you know, because it's not just going to be safe for you. You're going to safeguard everyone around you, and, you know, you're going to look after the NHS. Whatever happened to that message, you know, let's not pile pressure on the NHS. That's exactly what's happening now because of people who are refusing to be vaccinated and young people who just can't be bothered to get it.
Yes, and some questions about how many young people will get the jab. Figures not racing ahead as they did for the over 80s or the over 70s or, you know, those older age ranges. But so many young people have had COVID and are being told to wait a bit in order to get the vaccination after they've had it to recover a bit more. That could explain some of the delay. So it could be that this is temporary, Liam.
Yeah, well, so I was actually due to get my second jab when I became ill, and I was desperate to get it, but I couldn't because I'd just fallen ill. So I then had to wait. I've still not had it now. I've got to wait 28 days. So that is a potential delay because obviously when things reopened, particularly on the 19th of July, it was young people who immediately were mixing in nightclubs. So there will have been quite a lot of young people getting it then who will then have to wait. So hopefully we will, as that time progresses, we will see more and more young people getting it. I think one thing that's interesting here is the government and the NHS wanting to bring in the likes of social media influencers, because we actually know that has been a problem where there is so much disinformation being put out on social media. We've seen investigations about where some of that is coming from Russia and other places. I know of young people who have been wrongly influenced by this disinformation. So if they can get some of these extremely powerful social media influencers with millions and millions of followers, if they can get them on board, putting out the right message that this vaccine is safe, that everybody should get it, that it will protect you and your family, I think that could be a really important step. OK. Carole, let's move to the Daily Mail. They've gone after Alex Sharma, the climate minister. They say he jetted to 30 nations in the last 7 months, 6 of them on the red list. He said days after returning from red list Bangladesh, the cabinet minister met Prince Charles indoors without a mask, then visited a primary school. We obviously have not verified this. This is what they have found out. Nonetheless, I guess it is his job ahead of COP26 to meet and greet and talk to and persuade and cajole as many people as possible. What's your view?
Well, that's what he will say, of course. He will say that he has to go and meet all these people. But, you know, the rest of the world has been on Zoom for the past year and a half. You know, we've been talking to each other all over the world on Zoom. And it just seems incredible to me why Alex Sharma couldn't do the same thing. It's quite a nice thing to go to 30 countries in 7 months if you can, and have it paid for and by somebody else, and go to conferences and stay in nice hotels. It's a great thing to do. But actually, you know, when you're telling the rest of the country to stay indoors, to do your business, you know, where you can from home via Zoom, well, then it's a little bit much for him to be going to do that. And, you know, the fact that he wasn't quarantined or had to go into isolation when he came back, if he didn't have to do that, presumably when he came back, he got a test, which then released him. Well, why can't the rest of us do that? Why are the rest of us being held in hotels for 10 days at massive cost? If the climate change minister can have a test and then move freely among whoever he wants to move with, that is the height of hypocrisy. He will explain away his reasons for having to go abroad, but you can't explain away the fact he didn't have to isolate when he came back.
Carole, we're not in charge of a major global conference. I suppose that's one reason why the rule might be different. But we will have to talk about that more a little bit later on. Plenty more still to come. Is it fair for universities to set their own entrance exams because the pandemic has influenced A-level grades? Back with that in just a moment. Watching the press preview with me now, Carole Malone and Liam Thorp. Welcome back to both of you. Oh, she's gone. Where's she gone? She can't do that to me. Anyway, Liam, let's talk to you. Oh, here she is. Only Carole Malone. I'm going to talk to Liam. Oh, it was too late, Poppet, I tell you. Carole, I'll start with you then. Daily Telegraph. I suppose not surprisingly, given what happened to A-levels last year, universities are having a bit of trouble sifting through who's good and who's not, with the expectation that grades will be inflated.
Yes. First of all, let me I've had a I'm not being disrespectful, I'm coughing. Okay, so universities are saying they're going to go back to entrance exams because they can't any longer rely on A's. What I'm saying is there has been so much great innovation.
I think we might have to dial you back in, Carole. Powder or not, I'm sticking with Liam. Liam, take up the story if you can.
Yeah, so, I mean, with exams being cancelled for the second year in a row, we kind of know that when the results come next week, there's going to be some problems. Of course, last year, the problems were different. There was a lot of young people who felt that they were being very unfairly treated. They were having grades marked down, sometimes based on the historical performance of schools. This time, with it being solely down to teacher grades, the expectation is that there's going to be large-scale grade inflation. And what the Telegraph is saying is, from, as they understand, is that universities who are basically struggling because too many people, too many prospective students are essentially making the grade, that courses will be oversubscribed. So they're going to look at the idea of university-specific entrance exams. What The Guardian are saying tonight is that the government is basically being forced to fund hundreds of extra university places, medical and dental courses, because this rampant grade inflation means that there aren't going to be enough places as there are. So I think we are in for a pretty chaotic week next week. And with the greatest of respect, I'm not sure I've got that much faith in Gavin Williamson handling it all.
Yes, and indeed, in terms of the Guardian story, extra cash for medical schools. I remember speaking to the body that represents medical colleges, and they suggested that they over-offer 30 to 35% of places because they think people won't do as well in their A-levels. So, you know, not surprising that we've reached this point. We're also going to talk about Boris Johnson, Margaret Thatcher and coal mines, but we'll have to leave that. Liam, for now, Carole in her absence too. Thank you both very much indeed.